Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for being here. My name is Hasti Soltani. I'm the Adult Programs Manager at MCA Denver. Welcome to the second of 3 open source programs. For these programs, we asked our wonderful and creative MCA community to propose their most exciting ideas for MCA programs, and this program series is a result of that process. The next program, Open Source Diagramming Sentences, will be taking place next Thursday, and you can register for it via our website. All of MCA Denver's programs this season are offered online for free. If you have the means and would like to support our programming financially, please consider making a donation at mcadenver.org/support. Any donation amount is welcomed and is very appreciated. Today, we are pleased to continue this open source series with Art Under Threat, Fighting to Preserve Chicano Murals, a program proposed by Lucha Martinez de Luna and Jill Bolenhauer of the Chicano Murals of Colorado Project, and I'm so thrilled to introduce them both to you. Lucha Martinez de Luna is the director of the Chicano Murals of Colorado Project. She's also the associate curator of Latino Heritage at History Colorado, specializing in Chicano public art and community activism. She's also an archaeologist specializing in Mesoamerica and has worked on numerous archaeological projects around the world. Jill Mollenhauer is Associate Professor of Art History at Metropolitan State University of Denver and a member of the Chicano Murals of Colorado Project leadership. Here's Jill to introduce today's program. And thank you so much for being here, Jill.
Thank you, Hasti. Thanks so much to the MCA Denver for hosting this program. And thanks to all of you for joining. I am introducing the first segment in today's program, which will be a 15-minute presentation on the history of the Chicano mural movement in Colorado and its legacy among the artists of today by Lucha Martinez de Luna.
Hello, can everybody hear me? Okay, sorry about the beginning. I will try and go through this very quickly so we can stay on schedule. So my name is Lucha Martinez de Luna, as Jill presented, and I will just go right away to the next slide. Hasti. As an archaeologist, I excavate centers that have been abandoned for thousands of years. When we find monumental art, it helps us to better understand some of the customs and beliefs of the people that once lived in these cities. In Mesoamerica, when murals are found, the discovery is significant because they often provide a rare glimpse of how artists visualize their supernatural and natural world. Like artists in Mesoamerica, artists in the late 1960s began to paint murals of images describing their cultural heritage on the walls of public buildings in Denver. The murals adopted a social realist style, emulating the Mexican mural movement of the early 1900s. Muralists created art for the disenfranchised and strived to kindle a cultural reawakening in historically marginalized neighborhoods throughout the city. Next slide, please. By the 1980s, a distinct mural aesthetic developed in Colorado. The murals often portrayed contemporary and historic figures with the intent to unleash the powerful presence of prominent ancestors and community members. Interlinked between iconography from Mesoamerica and the indigenous Southwest, figures stood in backdrops of both ancient and contemporary urban and rural landscapes from New Mexico, Mexico, and Colorado. This eclectic art style often portrayed difficult themes of conquest and inequality, while visualizing the present and future in bold, vibrant colors. Muralists describe the prominent role of women in our communities, the importance of protecting our environment, and celebrated the ethnic diversity in Colorado and the nation. Next slide, please. The images on these murals help to replant ancestral roots and heal after decades of cultural abasement. They greeted children when walking to school, observed community events, and often embraced us during moments of grief or happiness. Unfortunately, these murals have continually been under threat and often erased from our communities by outside forces that do not understand or devalue their cultural significance. Despite the heroic acts of numerous activists during the civil rights movement, combating inequality and demanding inclusion, many communities continue to experience extreme displacement and erasure of our visual historic legacy as Denver races to be a regional cosmopolitan center. Next slide. Many Colorado, Hispano, and Chicano families that live and once lived in Denver can trace their ancestry to the late 1500s and early 1600s in the Southwest. Of both Native American and Spanish descent, Chicanos lived for hundreds of years in this area before it became part of the United States. Chicanos created a distinct lifestyle, Spanish dialect, architectural and artistic style in the northernmost frontier of the Spanish Empire. From the initial exploration of Coronado in 1540 to the Pueblo Revolt of 1680, from the fight for Mexican independence in 1810 to the annexation by the United States in 1848, Southwestern communities witnessed intense cultural clashes and changes to their daily existence. Next slide. Yet they persevered. Imagine in the course of one lifetime, some Chicanos experienced living in the Spanish Empire, then Mexico, and later in the United States. These drastic changes and the loss of land rights after the annexation of the Southwest prompted migration from New Mexico and today's southern Colorado to Denver and northern Colorado. Immigrants of Central and Eastern European origins began to populate Denver, as did many displaced Chicano and Mexican families from the Southwest. Some settled in the growing city Auraria, Denver's oldest neighborhood, also known as the West Side. Next slide. Home to seasonal Arapaho and Cheyenne encampments, the discovery of gold in the Platte River in 1858, prospectors began to transform the riverbanks into a thriving city. As the source of gold waned, Auraria became home to a poor working-class population, small business, and industry. By 1941, a large concentration of Hispanos and Mexicans lived in Auraria. In 1956, under the pretext of overcrowding, the city changed zoning, prohibiting the construction of new residential housing in this community. Next slide. After a devastating flood damaged the Auraria neighborhood in June 1965, officials seized the opportunity to declare the area irreparable. Local newspapers described the neighborhood as dilapidated and residents as uneducated and poor. They decided, and they used this excuse to displace all of this community living in Auraria. The Hispano and Mexican American population living in Auraria, residents attempted to resist this displacement, but by 1972, this community was completely forced out. Many moved to the Lincoln Park Housing Project, while others fled to other parts of the city. Next slide. Coinciding with the grassroots neighborhood movement in La Alma, Chicano youth throughout the country met in 1969 to draft El Plan Espiritual de Aztlán at the Chicano Youth Liberation Conference in Denver. Inspired by the Aztec creation story and their ancestral homeland, Aztlán, Chicanos proclaimed the American Southwest as their Aztlán. At the conference, Chicano youth drafted a resolution to proudly embrace and celebrate their origin story through music, dance, and theater. With the powerful application of public art, artists and people from the community challenged the status quo by questioning the prevailing ideology. The location for the first open space public mural was Lincoln Park Housing Project and Park. The La Alma Park Housing Project symbolized a vicious cyclical pattern of resettlement in the history of the Chicano Mestizo people in the Southwest. In 1970, artist and resident of Lincoln Park Housing Project, my father, Emanuel Martinez, began to assemble youth volunteers living in the projects. Next slide. With recycled paint, Martinez and the youth began to paint narratives of their heritage in the La Alma Park neighborhood. Gradually, Chicanos began to take ownership of neglected parks and began to feel a connection with their surroundings as they strived to improve them. Next slide. Familiar images on the walls of neighborhood parks created a sense of belonging and permanence in a space considered the heart of the community, to the extent that Chicanos began to conduct ceremonies there, such as baptisms and other cultural events. Children swam in the pools while families had picnics, listened to music, and socialized. But the city continued to closely monitor all activity in neighborhood parks. If too many Chicanos were gathered in the parks, the police would quickly arrive and disperse them. Next slide. Chicano artists quickly mobilized, forming their own collective creative force. By the mid-1970s, Colorado experienced an explosion of Chicano artistic expression and mural production that branched out into various locations. But the most difficult hurdle was trying to find walls and spaces that would allow young artists to paint narrative murals and develop their distinct painting style. Next slide. In 1961, Jose Lara from Navarra, Spain, traveled to the United States to minister in Colorado. When he arrived in Denver, Lara was immediately impacted by the extreme level of racial discrimination and segregation in Colorado. Ordained in 1968, he quickly sought to support the Chicano civil rights movement at Our Lady of Guadalupe Church. Next slide. The church became the Denver headquarters for the United Farm Workers. Between 1974 to 2001, Father Lara and Our Lady of Guadalupe Church supported local artists such as Andy Mendoza, Jesse Mendoza, James Romero, Jerry Jaramillo, Carlos Sandoval, Leo Tanguma, Emanuel Martinez, and Carlota Espinosa by providing walls around the church to paint images of their faith and cultural heritage. Murals were painted inside the parish center, the interior and exterior of the church and the hall, and all of these murals have been destroyed except for one, Carlota's, and she will talk about that next. The Chicano Murals of Colorado Project, in collaboration with Historic Denver, Inc. Action Fund, are implementing a Chicano mural preservation project to protect some of our oldest murals and most vulnerable. We are currently developing a plan to protect the Our Lady of Guadalupe mural, and with the aid of the Social and Public Art Resource Center in Los Angeles, digitize the image. In addition, we are collaborating with Historic Denver to designate La Alma Lincoln Park as a historic district, which would preserve the buildings, murals, and stories of the people that created this community. Next slide. We have also been awarded an Arts and Society grant to begin phase 1 of La Alma Civil Rights Memorial. A collaboration of 21 multi-generational artists will create narratives in the traditional Chicano mural style, describing the civil rights movement in Colorado. Next slide. Today, I consider all Chicano murals at risk, especially in schools that are experiencing demographic shifts. I encourage all of you to be vigilant and to report to the Chicano Murals of Colorado Project any murals that may be in danger of destruction. We as Coloradoans have a responsibility to preserve our cultural heritage, as all our stories share the same value and are relevant to the success of this state and nation. We welcome you and hope you enjoy this talk, and we really apologize for the delay. Thank you. Okay, well, I hope we're not having technical difficulties anymore, but the next presenter will be Carlos Rogel from Spark.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Lucha. Thank you so much for that introduction, and to the Museum of Contemporary Art in Denver and open source. This is really exciting. I'm so glad that I can share with everybody the work that we've done at Spark and the lucha that we've faced with saving this major legacy of public art in Los Angeles. And so today I'm going to just walk through some of the innovations that we've had to create to overcome what is at times bad policy, and in other instances just censorship and the segregation of the multi-ethnic identity of Los Angeles in public art. So our organization was founded in 1976 by 3 women founders, Judy Baca, Christina Schlesinger, and Donna Deach, and really was centered around the creation of activist art and public art that could be produced, that would also preserve the legacies and histories of communities, and to really promote a culture of action and civic engagement. And so the organization at its founding took over the Venice jail. So as you can see here, this beautiful Art Deco building is actually the original Venice jail. And so as the artists gradually took over the space, the building was transformed into really the heart of public art for the city of LA, where artists could be commissioned to produce works in communities, have long-term engagements in interrogating the histories and narratives of the Chicano community, as well as Black and Asian and other ethnic communities. And so the first project that Spark was able to sponsor was the Great Wall of Los Angeles by Judith Baca. So in Judy's work in the Los Angeles River, which has now taken a lifetime, this is actually a photo at the very beginning, before there was any infrastructure or painting, right after the concreting of the river. So for many who are not familiar with Los Angeles did have a river once. It was a natural occurring river, a very tumultuous river that would create seasonal flooding. And in the 30s, the government took it upon themselves to create a concreting of the river. And what ended up happening is that at the time, war industries in the northern part of Los Angeles would dump toxic waste that would then essentially, with the concreting of the river, it accelerated the destruction of the aquifer, of the ocean, the ecosystem, let alone the division of communities that had historically used the river and had an indigenous relationship, spiritual relationship for indigenous communities to the river. So this altering of the landscape was something that Judy instilled in the values of the organization early on. And in doing so, redirected funds from city infrastructure projects and employment projects to provide young people with employment opportunities. And so here you can see the tattoo on the wall where the river once ran, the major metaphor that Judy often speaks about in the speaking about the Great Wall. And so young people were employed through these recidivism programs, redirection programs, but really what they were able to do with the artists and Spark support was an interrogation of a history that was omitted, of Chicano history that had not been excavated, and they were able to create these monuments to the perseverance and resilience of community groups throughout from prehistory to the 1950s. And so in this formation of teams, you can see here this wonderful photo of a team from the 1940s production, creating this half-mile work inside the channel required an incredible amount of infrastructure, an incredible amount of effort to create coalitions across diverse communities. So in the Great Wall, it was really to approach a multi-ethnic identity of Los Angeles and to recover these histories that had been omitted, and so that young people could feel that they had a stake in the country, that they could see their families' contributions to the larger history of the United States, and that they too belonged, and that they too could have an empowering space to articulate those experiences and the victories, right? So in the early 2000s, our organization launched a capital improvement campaign, because what was at risk at this point, 35 years later, was actually not only the loss of the actual physical paint, but the stories, these incredible stories of resilience, of the contributions of the Chicano community, Asian American community, Black community. And so we were able to raise sufficient funds through major donations from Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy and the California Cultural Historical Endowment. These were funds that were created for the preservation of environmental spaces. And what was progressive about the funds were that they included social history and environmental history. And so with that, we were able to undergo the half-mile restoration in 2011 with volunteers, students, over 25 artists. Here you can see the team inside the channel coming back and giving the Great Wall a beloved bubble bath. We brought back many of the original artists. So here's Judy restoring the mural with some of her peers who 35 years later are painting in the channel, and you can see the amount of scaffolding and infrastructure support. So all of these innovations that really had to be developed even many years before the restoration. We worked with paint companies to create pigments that would last much more resilient in the sun. So reds and yellows that are often very fugitive. When we received the shipment of paint, some of the paints just said mural yellow. It didn't even have like an official name. It wasn't even sold in stores. So here's a photo of the before of the condition of the mural in 2011 before the restoration. And here it is after. So you could see the major impact that our artists had. One of the other innovations that we made was the development of a new consolidant that is able to clean and dissolve salts and recover the original pigment of the mural. So we would later on call it Mural Shield. But at the time, we created a chemical on the fly, and to be able to address this half mile of restoration. And so what was in 1976, today, if you go to the channel, the mural is still in pristine condition, and we've been able to recover the entirety of the work. And today the work continues. We are working on the extension of the Great Wall into the 1960s. This is currently the 1950s, the end of the mural as it is right now. We're going to continue on the other side of the wall and continue to do this incredible work. So what was inspiring about the Great Wall for the city was actually that for the first time, the communities could actually identify themselves in this larger historical trajectory. And at the time, Tom Bradley, the mayor of Los Angeles, asked Judy if this model could be replicated across the city. And out of this program emerged the Neighborhood Pride mural program, which commissioned women, artists of color, and created over 105 murals throughout the city in this really deep community process. But along with this, the creation and establishment of these commissioned works, what was unfortunately neglected was how these works would be preserved into the future. And they were major works that are beloved today. The defunding, so the program went through a gradual defunding over the years, and in 2003, the program ended. Much of the challenges were around the censorship of artists, the difficulties that city officials had with the commissioning of works without there being censorship to the murals that were being produced, and Spark always taking the stance that artists should be allowed to present the works. And so what we would see next is actually both the defunding of the mural program, which, as you can see here, very quickly declined over the years. And what increased at the same time was interest in youth incarceration and criminalization, to the point where in 2008, this is older numbers, but it cost $88,000 per young person to incarcerate them for a 9 to 12 month period. So we saw the economic shift. And at the same time, we never approached the equivalent of graffiti abatement program monies that were used to essentially maintain blank walls. So we saw both the defunding of the mural program and at the same time, this inflation of anti-graffiti programs. In 2003, we also suffered a ban on private property murals. And it took almost 10 years to be able to address the policy at the policy level, at the city level. Murals were attacked by advertisement companies. Mural policies at the city were attacked by advertisers, and to the point where the city gave up and just implemented a moratorium. And here's an image of Barbara Black forced to paint over her mural that she had done. She had young people in the neighborhood paint. She faced fines, even a lien on her house, even a threat of losing her home if she didn't paint out her mural. So after the recovery and being able to readdress the mural moratorium, Spark advocated for re-implementation of a citywide mural program. Unfortunately, we were only successful in the conservation of works, but the creation of new works and the commissioning of mentorship of young people was much more challenging and faced much more scrutiny from the city. One of the innovations that came out of this whole process was Mural Shield, which was a chemical consolidant that we used on the Great Wall that we developed, which allowed us to be able to apply this chemical over murals and recover the original paint that was on the wall. And of course, that allowed us to really speed up the conservation efforts. And another incredible outcome of this chemical is that it also served as a graffiti protectant. So by being able to apply the consolidant, we were able to use eco-friendly solvents, clean solvents, to be able to do these fast removals. And as you can see here, this is 90 foot of graffiti over hitting the wall by Judy Baca. And we're able to apply these chemical solvents without doing any damage to the original mural underneath. And since then, this has been 14, 15 times that our crews have had to go out without there having to be a need for in-painting at the time. But currently, this mural is under major controversy from having been overpainted by Caltrans and Metro. So we're actually in a legal battle right now to save the future of this work. But we're happy to say that it is restorable. Mural Shield has been used across the country since then. We've been able to support artists in consultations and in products and chemicals for both the restoration of works and the creation of new works, from the hottest parts in the country to the coldest. You can see Anchorage up there. And in our conservation of murals of these legacy works, we face quite a range of challenges, from graffiti that had been accumulated over the lack of a mural maintenance program, to graffiti abatement crews who thought that the graffiti itself had to be grayed out and whitewashed. This actually occurred the day before we arrived to do the restoration, so you can imagine how upset we were at the additional amount of work that we had to take on. But we developed chemical processes to be able to control the peeling off of paint. So we would create these windows. And once we created these chemical concentrations, we were able to very precisely remove bit by bit of coating. And this photo is an image of polyurethane, which is incredibly damaging to murals. And we developed a chemical process to be able to do that removal as well. And so what you can see here in this image is, on the upper right-hand corner is a very vibrant section of mural that has had the chemical treatment. And then you can see outside of that, this kind of gray pigment is actually the polyurethane. And we brought back the original artists to work on the project. So here you can see a current photo of Mary Lynn and Reggie Zachary. And the work in its pristine condition at the Minority AIDS Project completed. So we continued this process. We were able to do it over the course of a couple summers, working with the original artists, going and addressing the conservation challenges, being able to commission them originally, and being able to recreate that connection with the community, because conservation isn't only about the paint, it's also about reestablishing the connection with the community. And in often cases, like in La Ofrenda by Irene Cervantes, we had pieces that were obscured by graffiti, and community groups would think that it was a blank wall, and they would issue they would invite artists to come and throw up a piece without actually making the connections with the historical piece that was there. And so we worked with city officials and local community members to be able to recover the original works. And in this case, beneath that graffiti piece was La Ofrenda. And so you can see here again, this technique of the windows, gradually opening up and controlling the removal of unwanted paint in order to recover yet again the original work. And in Irena's case, this mural was actually, it had a coating that was removed by a graffiti abatement company, and they didn't reapply the coating. So in the subsequent vandalisms, when that company went back from the city's company, they called us and they said, "We don't know how to remove this. We didn't apply the coating." So that was the result of the loss of the entire work, and it took many years to be able to get it back to the stage. So today it's pristine and it's still visible. Many of the artists that we were able to work with, were able to do really successful restorations. Here's Charles Freeman and Christina Schlesinger, Noni Olabisi and Roderick Sykes. These were works that were lost or almost at the point of being disappeared, and we were able to recover them. So with that, the controversy that we're fighting today is really at the state level, with them denying resources for the restoration of Hitting the Wall, which had been whitewashed by now. Now it's been whitewashed 3 or 4 times consecutively. So as we've done this assessment to try to restore the mural, we have been in a struggle between the vandalism on the streets and the coordination of contractors who continuously have whitewashed the piece against all directions. So this is our next project. We're going to likely be doing an assessment in the next 2 weeks to redesign the chemical treatments. And really one thing that we've felt that we've been working on, and also maybe, to various success, what would improve the city's investment in public art is one, to enforce the Visual Artists' Rights Act that protects artists' individual works in private and in public commissions, and really the redirection of graffiti abatement funds so that it supports Chicano organizations and nonprofits that are doing this important work, to establish a maintenance fund for the preservation of the historic works, and to commission new works mentoring emerging artists in the next generation of youth. Other suggestions that we've tried to implement and are working in other capacities is the creation of a historic overlay zone for murals so that it can prevent the removals of those legacy works, and also to standardize the practices around muralism. And in some instances, even where advertisement is very interested in public space, to be able to regulate and distinguish between advertisements and legacy murals. So with that, thank you so much. And I'm so glad that we were able to share a little bit about our challenges and successes here in Los Angeles.
Thank you, Carlos. That was wonderful. Actually, the Chicano Murals of Colorado Project is collaborating with Spark on a lot of our preservation projects, and we hope to have the same results here. Now I will introduce Carlota Espinosa. She is one of the first, she is the first Chicana muralist here in Colorado. And not to waste more time, here we are with Carlota. Hi, sorry, it seems like we're still having technical difficulties. So this is a film from 1979 where Carlota is describing the painting of Our Lady of Guadalupe. Let's see if we're getting sound. No, not yet. So she's basically describing the process, and here is the mural at Our Lady of Guadalupe, where she is describing the imagery of Our Lady of Guadalupe. And what was so significant about this mural is that Carlota it was very important to her to also depict a Chicana. And so basically that is Jose Lara, basically the priest, he told her that she had that freedom to depict Our Lady of Guadalupe the way she felt was most important for our community. So as you can see, the mural here, what's so important about this is how much the mural was a part of our community. And this mural actually is now behind a wall, and it is the very last mural that is at Our Lady of Guadalupe. We have lost all of the other murals that were painted there, which was, as I mentioned in my presentation, several murals. So this was on the ceiling. That image that you see right there, that was actually on the ceiling of Our Lady of Guadalupe, and that has actually been painted over. So our hope is, with the help of Spark, that we can go, even if the mural is behind the wall, we can go behind the wall and actually digitize that image, so we can at least have that image somewhere else where we can see the mural in another space. And we are hoping that the image will be protected. It is actually a beautiful piece. And then the next clip, Carlota is actually talking about how she feels about the loss of that mural, And Carlota, I don't know if you would like to say a few words about the mural.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. That was Father Pat Valdez
Okay.
that was giving the mass there. He had me do some work on the sides. Also, Father Jose Olada had me. I painted the Our Lady Guadalupe mural with Father Olada's permission, of course, and request. And it's a long story, but in any case, Carlos Sandoval, Manuel Martinez, and Jerry Jaramillo had murals there, and there were a few other art pieces that are now non-existent there. And there is some of the people like Francis Geary, Jesse and Jesse Aguirre, and they have put together, it's called Los Guadalupanos, and they get together and they pray once a month. They pray the rosary. Can you see me?
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think we're going to just show the image of the mural from Escuela Tlatelolco.
Okay.
If you want to just say a few words about that one, that would be great. There it is. Do you see it?
Yeah. That was, I could never climb that now for sure. But this was commissioned by Corky Gonzalez's daughter, Nita Gonzalez, who was the president and director of Escuela Tlatelolco. And she asked me to do a few drawings. I did too. And she picked out this drawing I did here. And while I was painting it up on top, I had rocks thrown at me. That was pretty spooky. And the kids asked me how come I misspelled Tlatelolco, and I said, well, at that point when they're throwing rocks at you, you probably wouldn't remember your own name, you know. But anyway, it's been wiped out, and there is somebody else is painting a mural on there. I haven't been by to see it. I think that it was a fun mural, and the kids enjoyed it. There were teenagers that did help me on the bottom. They weren't permitted to climb the scaffold for insurance purposes and because they were little kids. But there were little kids that did do some of the bottom work on the bottom. And Nita Gonzalez, these two people with the graduation certificates in their hand, was Nita Gonzalez's son and daughter. And okay, it's sad it's gone, but
yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Carlota. We'll talk a little bit more after if we have time to do a chat. Now I'm going to, sorry, we're kind of rushing with time. I'm going to introduce David Garcia, and he's going to talk about a mural that he painted. Okay. Hi, David. Yeah.
My name is David Ocelot Garcia, and I was born in Denver, and I do sculpture and painting, and I'm first generation Mexican here in Colorado. My mom was from Guadalajara, Jalisco, and my father from León, Guanajuato. If you can go to the first slide. Yeah. So this mural I'm going to talk about, excuse me, a little, is very significant because actually the very first mural I ever did that was of my own. It was in 2008, and so it's really, really important. It kind of started me on my journey as a mural artist. So it has a very special place for me in regards to my career. But so the purpose of this mural is I got together with the Sisters of Color. So this mural is on 8th and Federal in the Sun Valley neighborhood there, and Sisters of Color was there at the time, and the idea was to, make the outside feel like what was going inside. What was going inside was trying to heal the community from many different things by way of like tradition and culture, specifically Mexica, Azteca, ceremony and philosophy, and so that really resonated with me because I at the time was also really trying to learn a lot about my ancestry and my heritage and those types of things. So it was really personal to be able to create this piece. And so one of the ideas was to have the community, especially the youth. That we actually had a group called Art in Motion that was with Adrina, one of the directors of Sisters of Color, and it was called Art in Motion. And so it was a lot of youth trying to inspire them to create art, to learn about their traditions, and to kind of embrace the idea of creating together and that whole aspect. So very, very important to the building in regards to the mission of trying to heal the community and bring some art to the neighborhood that is, a lot of factories in that. So if we can go to the next slide. During this process, I actually, during this mural, I actually studied a lot of the local Chicano muralists, and because I got to meet them, it was kind of something that happened at the time, but I got to meet a lot of the elder Chicano muralists and like Carlos Sandoval, and very inspirational to me. I love his work and and watching him paint, and so very, very inspiring. And also a collector and like supporter of the arts, local man, Luisa Barca, too, very inspirational to me because really opened up my vision in regards to the world, the art world, as a whole. And so very, very interesting, this whole dynamic of all these things happening during this process. So if we can go to the next slide. So the mural, so this is the finished mural once it was done, painted by myself, community, so many people involved. It was, again, therapy sessions for some of the therapy that was going on in the building. It was actually happening outside while we were painting this. And so some of the elements you'll see in this, and I forgot to mention the title of the mural is actually Huitzilopochtli, and that's in translation is hummingbird warrior, or I like to think of hummingbird spirit. So it's again from the Mexican Mexica tradition. And one of the interesting things is this wall is actually facing south, and when you're dealing with tribal traditions, there's the four directions, and the direction something is facing is very significant. So this is actually the direction of Huitzilopochtli, which is like the direction of creativity and abundance and many other things. But some of the symbolic tribal characters in here you'll see is Mictlantecutli, Tlaloc, and Coatlicue. And so those are some of the characters, and there's a lot of design work, a lot of metaphors in here, and so very very involved, very exciting. Again, one of my very first pieces that I've done that it just continues to inspire me and help me understand what I'm doing in my work. Next slide, please. So sadly, this is the current situation that the mural is in. It was whitewashed not too long ago. Very, very disappointing, very, sad about this situation that we're currently in. Very fresh situation. So it was whitewashed by the new tenants. Sisters of Color is no longer in the building. They actually own the building, but they rent it out. And so it was actually the new tenants decided to not really look at their contract that they actually have with the owners, in that they're not allowed, to touch these walls, because there's actually more murals on this building than just my own. And so they didn't really read that through or whatever. They have a lot of excuses of why they did this, but mainly they did it so that they can put their logo on this wall for their business. So we're currently trying to figure out what to do about this and how we can, fix this. And this is, been happening for such a long time. And I am trying to do my best to stay on top of this. And ultimately, the goal is to have this this mural come back to life here somehow, some way. So we're kind of trying to figure out how to make that happen, and hopefully by connecting with other people like Spark, very interesting to me what they're doing. So I appreciate your time, and if you ever want to visit my website, I have a lot of work. It's ocelotart.com. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, David. Yeah, we are looking for a solution for trying to recover this mural. It will be the very first time that we challenge a developer. So watch out. We're going to go after and protect our murals. Next speaker is Emanuel Martinez.
Hello, thank you for inviting me to this venue. I'm very impressed with Carlos' presentation. And I'm a Denverite. I was born in 1947, and I painted my first mural at the age of 13 when I was incarcerated in Lookout Mountain School for Boys in Golden, Colorado. I did a mural there in the rec center, and this was like 1961. And later I did. After being inspired by the Mexican muralist while I was in the civil rights organization, the Crusade for Justice, in a building that I was living at, I painted my first murals there in 1968, and in that same year, I hitchhiked to Mexico City to work with Siqueiros, David Alvaro Siqueiros, who was the most significant muralist in the world at the time. And he didn't need my help then, but I went back in 1969 to help him on the mural, the March of Humanity in Latin America, which is the largest mural in the world. So I had some really great experience working there, and I came back and was very inspired by the Mexican muralist. And so the first community mural I did was La Raza, which is was painted on a small building at La Alma Park, or Lincoln Park at the time. And this mural, I had to become an employee of the city of Denver in order to paint the mural. So I became a lifeguard, and this was facing the swimming pool, and it was done with the help of numerous young people in the community. And this mural no longer exists because the building was razed, but before that, it became Lalma Rec Center, which I founded and I directed for over a year. And I decided to once I painted this mural, the other parks like Mestizo Park at Curtis, and there was Robert F. Kennedy Center, and there was La Raza Park that wanted murals. So what I did is I gave up my directorship to La Alma in order to become a full-time artist for the city of Denver, and it was probably the first position ever given like this, and the last one. And I began painting these murals with the help of young people in the parks, and these murals were always reflecting the people that lived in the community. Like this one in Mestizo Park is was predominantly Chicano and African American, in 1970, and later I changed it in 1987 after it was painted out by, I believe, the city of Denver, who painted out a lot of my murals, but I was able to get some community help to restore the mural, to get it painted again, and that mural exists today. And we at that time we were painting these murals with lead-based enamel paint, which we know is very toxic, but it was the only paint we could get donated at the time, because Parks and Rec would not provide us any budget or equipment for paints or material or equipment or anything. So to give you an example, here's this one, Robert F. Kennedy, and all these murals were painted with this paint that was given by paint companies, because at that time they were getting rid of all their lead-based paint, so it was easy to get all the paint we wanted, because they were just discarding it anyway. But anyway, this is a good one of the highest murals we did with just ladders. We didn't have any, couldn't afford any scaffolding, and it was a very dangerous to do on 50-foot ladders. But we painted it, and this mural was also destroyed. And later, you go to the next slide. The Urban Dope Rural Hope mural was, I designed this, and it was a mural that was paid by Greenway in Ware Gulch, which is an area that was being restored and renovated by Greenway Foundation, and they're the ones that paid for it, and also through the Colorado Migrant Council that I was working for at the time. So I was able to get some funding to hire other artists, and this is the first time that Carlos Sandoval worked on this with me, Ernie Gallegos, Roberto Roybal, and Elfego Baca, and numerous kids in the neighborhood. But this mural was 350 feet long by 16 feet high, and I was facing the housing projects, and we spent 2 months working on this mural with the help of the kids, and it lasted I don't know exactly, it was done in 1977, but it lasted about 5 years or so. And somebody bought this building and just whitewashed it completely, and not consulting the neighborhood or the community. And they contacted me, and we were hoping to try to restore and take that white paint off, but it just never happened. But this is a real good example of one of the first murals in Denver that was completely whitewashed, just like David's was recently. And there's a lot, at least 10 of my murals have been whitewashed or destroyed. So I really like what Lucha is doing with this with this new program, this new project she's working with, and I'm looking forward on doing whatever I can to help preserve some of the older murals that have been done, like La Alma, which was done in 1978, and that was also done by the community. So,
thank you. Thanks, Dad. Okay, so to go to show you how many. This is just a very few sample of how many murals have been destroyed in Denver and in Colorado. very significant murals in our community. The last speaker is Jolt.
Hello. Thank you for having me. So will we be showing some slides as well? There we go. So I'll start off with, I'm a Denver native. I'm from La Raza Park, born and raised, born at DG. This is a piece that I did in the West Side in Denver, in the alley behind 7th and Santa Fe. If you go back behind that alley, you'll see that I painted almost every paintable surface back there. None of these pieces were commissioned. This piece in itself is a nod to Emanuel's work. A lot of the imagery we borrowed from his and innovated on it. You know, the conversation that I would like to have is about the gatekeepers that are calling the shots when it comes to public art. I think there's a whitewashing that's occurring literally and metaphorically. I spent 5 years, I moved to the West Side because the neighborhood that I'm from, La Raza Park, the North Side, has been gentrified and it no longer feels like our community. So I went to the West Side because I found gente there. I found my culture, and I painted a lot of walls. But to my surprise, my walls exist in the alley, but the walls that are being commissioned on the front side of the street were by Visit Denver, commissioning artists from outside of the city with their own agenda. And I feel like the gatekeepers are replacing the narrative and in a sense silencing us, so we're not heard or seen. This slide here that you're looking at is a mural that I did in Globeville recently. I'm from not only La Raza Park, but I moved to Globeville when I was 16. And Globeville is another Chicano barrio that is very dear to my heart. My mother still lives there. She can see these murals from her porch. Again, representing the mestizo in the center, showing the culture being handed down from one brown hand to the other, showing that cycle of life, showing it being nurtured, but with the mestizo and the sun in the center. You can go to the next slide. This is another one. This is on Burrito Giant. Growing up in the North Side, if you did grow up here, you remember the Burrito Giant. It's always been a part of our culture. Another part of our culture is the lowrider culture. We've always cruised 38th, and it has resurfaced again lately, where we're bringing it back and bringing people together. So me and my partner Juan Fuentes and my homeboy Alfonso Meps from Miami did this wall. These walls we change all the time, but every time we do, we're aware of what we're doing. And this one, I wanted to put that Monte Carlo hitting switches. I wanted to represent our culture and have it there for everybody to see, especially in the North Side, especially on Tennyson. You know, Tennyson has a thing called the First Friday Culture Walk. And I find myself often looking around and wondering where the culture is. So it's important that we hold it down for that. You can go to the next slide. This is an interesting mural. I created this one in the East Side, which is also considered the Rhino Art District. This mural itself was paid for by the Rhino Arts District themselves. And the rhino is their symbol that they use when promoting their art district. I see it as a symbol for development. I'll break it down. The guy that's on kind of driving the rhino with the big bags of money, that's Kyle Zeppelin. That's the guy that runs the Rhino Art District. The girl doing yoga is the quintessential white girl that you see in the neighborhood that comes with gentrification. The white girl with the spray can taking the selfie of herself is a representation of the gentrification that has happened within our art form. Nowadays, street art is nothing more than gentrification for wallpaper. My art, coming from the streets, coming from a product of the Chicano civil rights movement and the muralist movement, as well as the New York City graffiti movement has always been born of the street. So when I see people come into it and consider themselves street artists, it's ironic to me. And I wanted to represent that. The wolf running around the rhino's legs, that represents Ken Wolf, who is a vicious developer who doesn't care about our community. But most importantly in all of this piece is Shirley. Shirley Castro is the little lady that's standing there protecting her ground, protecting her home with her tortilla roller and holding it down fearlessly. Shirley actually turned 85 yesterday, and was born in the East Side and has lived in the East Side her whole life and will more than likely die in the East Side. This mural, with all the mural events that are happening as far as like Streetwise Boulder and the Colorado Crush, I don't know if these are necessarily positive things. I think this could quite possibly be a death to our culture, because what they're doing is there's gatekeepers from outside of the culture calling the shots, and all these opportunities are being given to out-of-state artists to come in and paint these walls in our communities that they have no connection to. This one is slated to be painted over by another Chicana from Burque. I had a conversation with her today, and I called her and I asked her if she realized that we're being put up against each other right now. She told me she's going to come here and she's going to paint over this mural, but what she's going to do is she's going to paint somebody from 5 Points. So she's going to represent the community. I asked her how she could do that by literally painting over an artist that's from the community, that's celebrating the community by representing a woman such as Shirley. And I also explained to her that we're being put up against each other. Why can only one person from the community be celebrated at one mural at a time, when this is a festival that grossed over $700,000 last time? They used the funds from this festival to put a candidate in to run an election for somebody for a mayoral candidate. You know, there's power within this art that we're doing, and we got to be careful how we're using it. The quote on the wall also is in part some words from Bobby Lefebvre, who's a Chicano poet and playwright who comes from the same neighborhood as me, who was out there with me while I did the mural. I think, again, this comes back to the conversation of the gatekeepers, people putting themselves in position to represent our culture and represent our city when they're not from it. You can go on to the next slide. Viva la Raza. That's a piece that I just did for the Streetwise Festival in Boulder. Again, the same thing. I only did the piece so I would be present and have my voice. The way that they played me, they gave me the budget that they gave most artists a budget simply for a lift. A lot of the artists that came to this festival that are doing murals are not even from the communities. They don't even understand, not let alone the community of Boulder, but Denver and Colorado as a whole. I felt the need to represent our people, but I also, during this process, I think it's important. I lost the job that I was bidding for a big contractor that would have paid me well, to somebody that came out and did it for exposure for this event. I think that when we're having these events, they need to be mindful that you're bringing a bunch of artists in here and you're sending all this funding for public art outside of here with them when they leave, and it's not bringing up our own artists, and in a sense we're losing our voice as well. I know that a Viva la Raza piece may seem out of place in Boulder to some, but I'm aware of my father's generation and the civil rights movement and Los Cies de Boulder and the struggles that happened with the scholars and the students and the people that fought and were activists for our movement. I'm also aware from working with the Bridge Project that I Have a Dream Foundation and Eco Arts through teaching cultural sustainability and art, that there is a huge Latino population in Boulder that needs to be represented. So I hope when they see this mural that they know what's up, and I hope it's supporting them. You can go to the next slide. This is another thing that I find interesting too. So for me, I'm trying to hurry along because I don't want to take up too much time, and I appreciate all the speakers that came before me and those that will also speak after me. This is interesting because this building was being torn down to make way for Meow Wolf. And this was done illegally. I did this without permission. I'm a graffiti writer and my art comes from the streets, as I expressed. One thing that I'm fighting against, not only the gentrification and losing my community that I grew up in, but also seeing the gentrification of the art form. But a lot of these murals don't even stay up long enough because the building itself is getting torn down. The buildings aren't surviving. The culture isn't surviving. There's a lot more than them just painting over the murals, but we're being silenced and not even being given a chance really to develop our communities, because now we're up against conglomerates of Richmond. So this is a piece that somebody snapped of that gorilla that was getting torn down, and that stayed up for a good 6 years. What I would like to end with is simply that of being aware who the gatekeepers are, who these people are that are putting themselves in position to dictate our culture. What is the impact of this street art? Is it representing the people of the streets? Is it being painted by people from those streets? We should expect more of the people that come into our communities and create art. They should have some sort of a connection to the community and have put in some work into the community. Who are the people that are profiting later on giving these tours, and further gentrifying the culture and further being gatekeepers and rewriting the story and telling a separate narrative? With that said, thank you for giving me the time, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Joel. Now we'll have a quick conversation with all the other artists. If you can bring them back on the screen. Go ahead, Jill. Do you want to start?
Sure. I think we would just like to just acknowledge how interesting everybody's presentation was. And we just wanted to see if you guys wanted to respond to each other first and foremost. Did anybody say anything during their presentations that you guys want to comment on or respond to in any way? Well, don't forget to turn on your mics.
I would like to say that the approach that Carlos has taken, the ingenuity to save these murals, the connection to the history was very inspiring. To be able to see Carlota, knowing your artwork, and to be on the same panel as you, as well as Emanuel, is such an incredible honor. David, as a brother of my same generation, and to see his work and the validity and the beauty of it, and to acknowledge also the ladies, the scholars that are behind the scenes here fighting for us and doing all this. I just feel very appreciative to be in this moment in time. So thank you guys for that.
I'd like to ask Carlos a question. The large mural, Urban Dope, Rural Hope, the real big mural, it used to be the largest mural in Denver, but that's been whitewashed. Is it possible to bring that back? Yeah, because it was done with enamels and acrylic paint, which they normally use on exterior buildings, doesn't really adhere to oil-based paints. And I'm wondering if it's possible to try to bring that back and restore it.
What we found is like paint, the layers are always separate. So it's just a matter of finding the right chemical to be able to control how the paint peels off. So any mural that's whitewashed, whether it's enamel or oil, it's just a matter of just finding the right chemical treatment that can allow you to peel it with control. Yeah.
So it's possible even to maybe bring David's mural that was recently whitewashed. Do you think that's possible?
Yeah, we've seen, like in the examples that we shared, those murals are oftentimes 15, 20 years old or even more. And whether it's graffiti, paint, aerosol, oil, we've had success. I mean, and so long as there's people willing to experiment and artists willing to be trained in the conservation, because that's the key, that the community itself is empowered to stand up and protect and do the conservation themselves. So it's not seen as an opportunity for a conservation expert to come in and kind of take ownership of the public space. It's important for the artists and the community themselves to be involved in that innovation so that the connection that is there continues to grow. Yeah.
Yeah, because as you probably know, that in California, Cicado's mural that was whitewashed was brought back and restored, which was, quite a feat, I would imagine. And it just seems to me like if of course he had, there was a big budget to do that project, but it seems to me like maybe we could bring some of these murals that still exist, underneath this whitewashing that's been done.
And where it's not possible to recover the original paint, the digital technology could allow for those murals to come back. So we've also done digital conservation in instances where you have a slide or a little photograph that could be turned into the large scale mural again, so that it's not lost in the public space.
Cool.
Carlos, to ask a question about something you just mentioned, how can, and this isn't just a question for any of our panelists, how can people in their own neighborhoods work to help protect the murals that are in their communities? What kind of things has Spark seen, or again, any of our other artists, like what ideally should people be doing to help protect these legacy murals?
I mean, one thing that we've done is really reestablish the partnerships that were there historically. I know that gentrification is a very powerful force, like Joel pointed out, where communities of color, Chicano communities, often through mechanisms of segregation, and in our case in Los Angeles, redlining, where Chicano and Mexican American and Latino communities were not even allowed to own commercial buildings in communities. What we're seeing today is an extension of that practice of the denial of resources, funding to be able to own the properties that have these murals. And so these outside developers, outside owners, this exchange continues to happen. So some of the strategies that we've done is, one, reconnect with the original people in the neighborhood, because oftentimes it's too expensive to go somewhere else, and that's, you'll find people 30 years later still living in those neighborhoods. Make that connection again. Allow for there to be investment in an organization that is rooted in the community, that has the interests of the artists themselves, so that then there's a communication if the mural's vandalized. We've had people call us on the phone and text us when a mural's getting whitewashed, and they run out and stop it themselves. So that kind of relationship we found has been very, very effective at the community level. But we're also talking about a policy level and a kind of a change of challenging the capitalistic interest of privatizing public space.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Jolt, I want to thank you for the kind words that you said. You're my vecino, because I was born on 26th in Curtis, in a little tiny Victorian house that still stands. But we come from the same neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
I was born on the 26th in California. So I was born just around the corner.
Vecino también. Vecino también. Yeah, I met your mom. Your mom was living there. I think I met your mom there on California Street. Yeah. She was a powerful woman, your mother.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lucha, and all you wonderful people who put this together.
Mm-hmm.
It's very impressive.
Yeah.
I hope people listen and protect the murals. All these people that lost their murals, they should all hire them back, give them a lot of money, tell them to go paint the town.
Yeah. I just want to say, Also, thank you to everyone here and the artists out there. The artists on here. I'm always curious what you guys are doing, and I'm always inspired by you guys too. So I think that we're all I think a lot of artists on here are very original, definitely original, but we kind of follow the same path, like we're on the same path in a way. We just do it in our own way. And so I think what I see, what I'm excited about is like meeting Carlos with Spark. I mean, I don't know a lot about. I've done murals in California, not in LA, but I don't know a lot about the mural scene out there, and but I know there's a lot going on. So it's very very fascinating what you're doing out there, and like watching some of that imagery, and like I feel like we're on that same path here, and it'll be a little different for us, the way we do it here. But I think we're in the same space, and like Lucha. I always find a lot of support in Lucha's words, and I think we have a really good. I have a lot of faith in what we're doing, and I'm really excited to see what happens. And in regards to the preservation, I like the way you guys talked about preservation on different levels, but also like who's talking, like how are the younger generation learning about murals. And so I like what Joel was saying about being concerned about who's teaching the younger people, or who's in. And I think it's all something that we're discussing, and so I'm real excited about those conversations. And so I have a lot to say, a lot about that, but I think it's so cool to me, and real inspiring, and gives me a lot of hope. And even about my mural right now, I have a lot of hope of what's going to come from that. So thank you all again. Really cool.
Well, this
Thank
was
you.
wonderful. Yeah, thank you so much. Hopefully we'll have a part two. Oops. Hopefully we'll have a part two of a possible testimony of one of our murals. Does anybody else have any closing words? Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, and sorry about all the tech difficulties, but we managed to get our message across. So thank you so much for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Very nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Good job, Jill.